Hi, I hope you're doing okay. Right now, I'm going to take you with me on a trip I took by motorbike through the pine forests and coffee plantations of Vietnam's central highlands. If things have been a little hectic or intense for you, you may want to take a few moments to yourself now for a couple of quiet, deep breaths to get comfy and to simmer down. It's late spring and coastal Vietnam is at its off-peak hottest. The people around us down at China Beach, from persistent beach hawkers to highly strung taxi drivers, all had seemed a little wilted, beaten down by the hard, wet heat. Dalat, by comparison, looks a dream. Our bus gears itself noisily to tackle the last of the long tarmac inclines before swinging around a picturesque grass-fringed lake to a busy market where stacks of ripe green artichokes cascade into streets still cool and slick with the recent rain. Cool air flows through the open window, ruffling the pages of our guidebook. From the bus window, we see vendors grilling fish and loudly blending avocados into fruit shakes the color of mushroom soup. Squatting ladies sell colorful knitted cardigans and woolen hats from tarpaulins on the ground. As we alight into the cool afternoon, I find my pulse tentatively slowing, and I mentally begin to rifle through the warmer clothes in my backpack. Dalat is South Vietnam's largest highland pleasure town, known locally as the city of poetry, of love, of eternal spring, or city of thousands of pines. Set in a valley on Lang Biang Plateau, it stretches out between pine trees and coffee plantations at a comfortable 1,500 meters above sea level. At the time of our visit in the late 2000s, it counts local newlyweds, golfers, and off-track tourists among its biggest fans. Like us, they are lured by the chocolate box clusters of colonial villas, pleasure lakes, and wide suburban boulevards that make it feel just a little Swiss. There is also still a very faint whiff of left-bank bohemia in some of its old cafes, remnants of the days between the colonialists and the communists, when local intellectuals had a brief but glorious puff of freedom. The French, we have read, founded Dalat in the 20s as a breezy Parisian doppelganger during its rule of Vietnam, and even made it state capital for a while. They uprooted many Vietnamese from their homes and banished them to lower altitudes, installing stately villas, schools, and a palatial hotel. The city began to evolve a little apart from the rest of the country and fashioned itself an exclusive, cerebral reputation that has lingered a bit. Quirkier diversions have kept Dalat on the low-key traveller trail. We are looking forward to meeting local legend and poet Doi Viet, now in his 70s and wearing a perpetual beret, who we have heard welcomes visitors into his villa to drink tea and peruse poems in the scroll-papered walls of his conservatory. We've read of eccentric Zen artist, monk and poet Thai Vien Thuc, who creates on-the-spot paintings for visitors to his Lam Tai Ni pagoda, and of the wild fiberglass surrealism of architect Dang Viet Nga, who's built a hotel that would have looked at home in Alice's Wonderland. And yet our main reason for visiting Dalat is to leave it at some speed, for we are on the trail of the easy riders. The riders are an informal yet dedicated band of tour guides, well versed in local history, who tailor trips around Vietnam's central highlands by motorbike, making Dalat the gateway to the highlands' many waterfalls, pine forests, coffee plantations, and agricultural villages. The original riders began to lead their first tours in the 90s on their old German motorcycles. Many were men who had fought with the southern forces against the Viet Cong and couldn't find jobs after the war. The reviews that we have read speak of exhilarating moments, local insights, and above all, a warm and genuine welcome. One told us to watch out for imposters, though, who may not abide by the rider's principles and training, and to look out for the official Easy Rider badge. We have been told to head towards a small cafe on a side street, otherwise known as Rider HQ, and we locate the Peace Cafe by the long row of parked motorcycles in the street outside. Pushing through glass doors, we find a sparse, light room with low stools and wooden tables, and as we enter, one of the few men drinking coffee, all with a tanned, weather-beaten look about them, comes forward with a warm smile. Noon comes complete with badge on a battered baseball cap and a notebook filled with the happy recommendations of satisfied customers. "You call me Wing," he advises kindly as we start tripping over the consonants in his name. He offers Wingman as an American-favoured alternative. And indeed, the rumpled leather, the laughter lines, greying hair and macho informality does channel a little Americana, a middle-aged Paul Newman, perhaps, sprinkled with a late career Mickey Rooney. We agree on a one-day Highland tour with Nguyen and his friend Tran, starting the following morning early. Bring a good coat and a waterproof parka, he advises us. The Highlands have their own weather system. Emerging from our villa guest house early the next morning, we are greeted by a crisp, rain-free day, a cheery salute from our waiting guides, and 2 extra motorbike helmets. We both alight our respective bikes and settle comfortably on the back, you behind Wing and I behind Tran, with our hands lightly holding the guardrails behind us. As we start to gain speed, we find that we are not the only travellers with a fancy for 2 wheels and early starts. We join what feels like scores of other bikes in one great motorcade around the lake, many with tourists perched on the back. The morning air is cool as it buffets our jackets and streams through our helmet visors, yet we are mostly sheltered in our guide's slipstream, and the calm thrum and gentle swerves of the bikes are a soothing early morning start. Xuan Huang Lake lies quiet. A few solitary people sit on its grassy banks with long fishing poles. We drive past a flock of swan-shaped paddle boats bobbing quietly next to a pretty lakeside hut, waiting for the honeymooners that flock to Dalat each year to awake. The city has made the most of its reputation as the city of love, cultivating flower gardens and arcade-style attractions to keep the lovers busy, and it does well from it. We coast by the grand white expanse of the Sofitel Dalat Palace, an Art Deco affair that caters to many of the golfing enthusiasts that visit here. Our guides tell us of richly furnished interiors in polished oak and heavily gilded furniture. We pass flower nurseries on the suburbs of the city, glimpsing vast technicoloured rows of roses, gladioli, and oncidium orchids through gaps in greenhouse sheeting. then before we know it, we are alone. The light exhaust fumes of the city melt away as our bikes climb a gently curved stretch of road. To our left, a green agricultural patchwork drops away into a valley in rich, bright shades of green before rising up again into distant hills. Tiny clusters of people are at work in the rice fields, their conical straw hats catching the sun. That could soon be all greenhouses, Wing calls back to you, explaining that the popularity of organic vegetables overseas would soon see the land sheathed in glass. On our right, the road is fringed with pine forest. The atmosphere is alpine, and the smell of firs on the wind is strong, fragrant and nostalgic. Pine cones litter the forest floor, tumbling out into the road. We are told that these evergreen forests were intensively logged and depleted after the war. They only began to thrive again recently, once a caretaker system was set up by the government. Those who agree to protect patches of woodland against theft and fire for a year are rewarded with food. Wing points out a battered maroon plaque nailed to one trunk as we pass by, emblazoned with a family's name in yellow paint. The morning sees us pull up to and visit a series of small commercial greenhouses run by friendly families known to Wing and Tran. We are told that each easy rider has their own network of friends and pit stops, so that no person or family gets overwhelmed by visitors. And most guides take care to share the proceeds of their tours in small ways too. This feels to be so. At a small flower farm, where a family cultivate Dalat roses for sale in Ho Chi Minh City, our welcome is very warm. A working matriarch pauses from her task as we pull up into the family courtyard, pulls off her gloves and approaches us with a smile before beckoning us down aisles of red, pink and white roses. The air is moist and heavy with fragrance, and we feel the awakening sun beat down through the pale sheet plastic roof. We return to our bikes and hit the virgin tarmac of country roads, pulling up at a series of small villages and the houses within. Each reveals a cottage industry of some sort, and rumpled, barefoot hosts genially stop their work or mid-afternoon nap to beckon us inside. Clusters of green peppercorns grow in one backyard, and we try them fresh, the taste spicy and tart. We find one host in a large, light greenhouse, gently watering suspended bags of damp sawdust from which curl delicate ears of dark and light brown mushrooms. Outside, a group of ladies sit, washing the mushrooms and laughing. "They're laughing at you," says Wing. "At your skin. They're recommending that you find a good hat to protect you." Then, smelling of newly applied sunscreen, we hit the pine-fringed road again, coasting through the dappled light, this time to a small silkworm factory where we find the air thick with steam and the deafening clacks of machines. We pause for lunch together at a simple roadside cafe, positioned on the edge of a sweeping valley view. The fields are empty now, the fierceness of the sun sending workers inside for shade and rest. We are the only customers, and the only sounds to be heard are birdsong, the gentle rustling sway of the treetops above us, and the occasional passing car. A toddler lies asleep on the wooden terrace, almost enveloped by a faded green military hammock. we sit on the terrace, taking turns to rock the snoozing infant and eat bowls of salty, spiced fur, soup noodles in a delicious broth garnished with fresh herbs. We speak little, enjoying the quiet of the afternoon. Yet once our host brings out a tray of iced artichoke tea, Wing, who is the more vocal of our two guides and the more comfortable with English, leans back, lights up a cigarette, and tells us a little about his war. After the northern forces beat the south, Wing eventually received just a few days of what was called re-education, he says, though without going into too much detail. But he spun out his tale about the retreat that he and a friend from one of the hill tribes had needed to make to get home at the end of the fighting. Their clandestine journey through the hills, foraging for food and sleeping rough each night, he said, took 10 days. But one friend of his from the same unit had emerged alone from the forest months later, half naked and half mad. Wing also tells us about his early days as an easy rider, when the group was in its infancy. He could barely speak English, he said, and a German doctor had asked the unthinkable, that he leave Dalat and take her on a 4-week tour of the country. The notion scared him, he said, but with her he travelled the farthest he'd ever been away from Dalat, getting information and directions from locals in the evening while she rested, and then plotting the route with her the morning after. They're still in touch today, and Wing's customers can now book him for up to a month at a time. He says he has few dull moments between old GIs tracking down former girlfriends and a host of other visitors from around the world, each with stories of their own to share. Donning our helmets again and taking up our positions on the bikes, we coast onwards, this time looping back around towards Dalat and feeling ourselves slowly start to descend. We both feel full, content and comfortable after our lunch, with the thrum and rumble of the motorbikes not a little soporific. Yet the pit stops along the way, a range of cascading waterfalls and a large glistening Buddha statue, keep our wits about us. Each of these stops in the rushing current of our road trip is like a little eddy of serenity, and as the sound of the bikes are cut, they are replaced by bird song and rushing water. Finally, we reach our penultimate stop, the wooden terrace of a family home on one of the highlands' many verdant coffee plantations. And as we sit, inhaling the rich fragrance of the drip coffee, looking out across neat dark rows of coffee trees in a burnishing light, I start to wonder why it is that we're heading back at all. After all, we have time and a little money on our hands, and trips with the easy riders are surely much better enjoyed over the course of, say, a week, via the homestays and hill tribe villages of the rural highlands. You and I exchange a look, and you nod and smile. Wing, Tran, I say, turning to our guides. How does your dance card look for the coming 6 days?